Hello and welcome to another edition of the Bruce and Bob Show. Bob Mueller with News 2. Bruce Doby, Nashville media entrepreneur, coming to you from Jimmy Kelly's Steakhouse, brought to you by Hall Strategies. We're going to talk a little politics today. A little later, we're going to talk plagiarism with Vanderbilt professor Bruce Berry. Is it a big deal what happened at the Republican National Convention? Some folks say yes, some folks say no. Before we get to the RNC, which a lot of stuff going on, big news here locally as Mike Stewart, Tennessee Democrats are asking for a special session of the legislature to be called and have Jeremy Durham expelled. We saw what happened earlier. The Republicans kind of said the report has come out. He has admitted to some of these allegations, saying not all are true, and they've washed their hands saying let the voters decide. Thoughts?
Well, the Democrats really see an opening here in the State House, and the place is overwhelmingly male and it's overwhelmingly Republican, and they see this as their opportunity, given the fact that you've got this Trump who seems to be a misogynist in much of what he says and utters, for them to make inroads with potential Democratic candidates at the state level. So they've thrown everything that they possibly can at Beth Harwell and the Republican leadership. So here you have Stewart calling, this is just one of many things that they have attempted to do to really turn out the vote in favor of women in this next election cycle.
The speakers have to call for it. The governor has to approve it. None of that's going to happen.
Yeah, none of that's going to happen. The strange thing about this is, suppose you do get rid of Durham now, or you have gotten rid of him now, or you come out against him, that puts their Democratic candidate who's running down in Williamson County, Holly McCall, in a difficult situation. I mean, Holly's best chance in the general election as a Democrat is
if Jeremy Durham wins.
Is if Jeremy Durham wins. So Democrats really should want Jeremy Durham to win, but they're doing everything they can to beat him right now.
Their argument this time is that whether he wins or loses, he's going to collect a pension, and that taxpayer money shouldn't pay for a pension of someone accused of sexual harassment. Interesting argument. It's another way to try to get him out of that position. I don't think it's going to fly very far, though, because the response from Republicans has been the election is, 2.5, 3 weeks away.
Yeah.
It's not enough time. It's too expensive. Yes, this is serious, but let's let the voters decide.
Yeah, let's let the voters decide. I mean, theoretically, and if you had a newspaper editorial board and a page at which to say this sort of stuff, you would have advocated that the guy be thrown out immediately and that you'd thrown the kitchen sink at him and gone and all in favor of his opponent in the primary. But Beth didn't do that.
So have you enjoyed the Republican National Convention?
I have enjoyed every minute of it, Bob.
I have too. It is.
Thank you for asking.
Next
world,
Donald Trump promised a different show, and we've gotten that.
Yeah. This is like martial arts, whatever fighting. I mean, everything they have done, they have stubbed their toe. Everything from the moment that they announced Pence in such a weird way, and the 60 Minutes appearance was what foreshadowing. That odd appearance between Pence and Trump on Sunday night, and then you roll into Monday, and that was a disaster when Colorado and Alaska had their floor fights, and then
Big
you roll
floor
into
fights.
Huge floor fights, and then Melania with her plagiarism thing, and then last night with Cruz failing to endorse Trump. So every minute of it has been just absolutely riveting.
Bizarro stuff too. I mean,
bizarro.
Just you knew there was going to be some differences. Trump walking out of the fog to introduce his wife. Trump being shown 3 nights of the 4 nights. Usually the nominee doesn't show up until the last night. Trump holding an interview with the New York Times, I think it was, last night. It's going to be released today. It is released today. Before he gives his speech, and he comes out basically against NATO, which is totally opposite of the Republican agenda. Bizarre stuff. MSNBC did a really interesting piece. They showed where Trump's plane was going to land, where the big Trump plane was going to land, so people could see the Trump billboard, which, advertising is good, and where he needed to go. His Trump helicopter was here, then he was going to fly to here and then be at the convention center. The flight was about 2 blocks. So it was all staged so that we could get Trump coming off the helicopter, meeting with Pence. And then we had the air kiss. He tries to kiss Mike Pence.
Oh, that was bizarre.
So
a little homoeroticism always does a good thing.
It has been entertaining. They promised that, so we got to give them an A+ on that. The question is, have they succeeded in doing anything other than talking to the base, rousing the people who are already there? Everyone says those undecided people, they don't like all this piling on of Hillary Clinton, and it has been every night. It has been vitriol. They haven't really talked about programs or policies. They've just had these kids talk about what a great father is, trying to soften him that way, but there's been no leaders up there talking about this is why, this is the reason why, this is going to change if you elect Donald Trump.
Yeah, they failed to articulate a reason. They failed to define the candidate. Donald Trump emerges from this convention known only for having thrown a bad convention. The second thing they did do effectively, I do believe, is demonize Hillary, and they have demonized her at, just on
And it's
on
gonna
and
hurt
on
her.
and on and on. And it will hurt her. And look, there are reasons to demonize Hillary Clinton. Everybody can understand that, ought to understand that. But by and large, it has been an utter failure. And to my this reminds me of some of the Democratic conventions in the 60s, which were just absolute riots, literally. And so this has been just a blunder, utter blunder.
All this will be forgotten. All forgotten. We're taping this on Thursday. If Trump hits it out of the park tonight, everything now for his convention sits on his shoulders delivering this speech. It's going to be a speech where he reads off a teleprompter, which we know he's not as good as he is off cuff. The question is, does he divert from the teleprompter and begin ad-libbing, as it were? We've seen some of his teleprompter speeches when he introduced Mike Pence and some other things, and they're really not very good. He doesn't do it very well. It's not an easy job. That's what he's going to be doing tonight, and a lot is really hanging on the balance on his speech.
I want you to say whether or not he'll divert from script.
Yes.
I say the same thing. He will, and he very well may stub his toe. I mean, there may be a great headline tomorrow just just pointing out something insane that he has uttered. In much the same way that he said, and I read the New York Times story today, if Denmark is attacked, he may
You're
not
on
help
your
us.
own.
You're on your own, buddies. Good luck with the cod.
Obviously, day one was all about Melania Trump's speech and the plagiarism issue. Let's bring Bruce Berry, professor
absolutely.
at Vanderbilt University. The seriousness of the charge is
Welcome,
one
Bruce.
thing. The political aspect, I guess, Bruce, changes it a little bit. Obviously, in your field, as a student plagiarizing a paper or something like that is much more serious. You could get kicked out, you're going to get an F, that kind of stuff. Talk about the seriousness of plagiarizing a political speech, not just taking someone else's words, but denying that you did this and just, completely lying and denying that it happened, and then having your surrogates lie and deny that it happened, and blaming the media, and how dare you, and so on. And by the way, it did happen.
Well, let's start, first of all, let's just start with the basic definition of plagiarism. The sort of generic definition of plagiarism in any field of endeavor, it could be academic work, it could be journalism, it could be a political speech. I mean, the generic definition is passing off someone else's work or thoughts as your own. So it's all about it's not necessarily avoiding using other people's work, but it's about failing to cite it or acknowledge it or credit it. There's no question that what happened in the Melania speech fit the definition of plagiarism. So it clearly happened. Now, the sort of political machinations of the Trump campaign and others in Trump world over that 48-hour period until the supposed truth came out was bizarre because they spent so much time trying to deny something that we all could see. I mean, the one thing about plagiarism is there are some subjective aspects, I suppose, to how bad it is, how egregious it is. There are some forms, we see this with our students certainly, where they kinda sorta cited the source, but not enough. If you go back, the talk of all this revived some discussion of the trouble Joe Biden got into back in the late 80s. And
Cost him his presidential run.
And I went back and looked at that, and in his case, he plagiarized a law school paper, but he did cite the source. He just only kind of cited it once in passing when he had actually borrowed like 5 pages of text, So there are degrees of plagiarism, but the fact of the matter is we all can see it's there. So it was sort of a kind of a Dada experience watching watching Trump's campaign manager Paul Manafort and that fellow Spicer with the RNC on camera, looking into the camera and denying it occurred. Yeah. There is nothing to see here, folks. Yeah. And then I guess it was Spicer who then went on to the different tack of accusing Michelle Obama of being the plagiarist, or equally a plagiarist.
We don't know where she got the speech from.
She got those ideas from somewhere else because, and he was trying to argue. He was trying to argue. It was almost an existentially interesting argument that all statements, all communication, all work of all kinds is derivative of something. Yeah. The sort of "we are all plagiarists" argument. It wasn't compelling, but it was certainly entertaining.
Well, in terms of defenses, I particularly loved Chris Christie's statement that 93% of it was accurate.
Yes. I mean, in my world, 7% gets you hauled before the
let me ask you
hauled before the honor committee, just in the same way that 70%.
I want to ask you about your world. You saw the apples to oranges comparisons. You saw the highlighted sections and what Michelle said, what she said. What would have happened at Vanderbilt if a student of yours had done that? Would that have been an honor council trial?
Well, the way it works at Vanderbilt is it's the discretion, well, it's the professor who notices it, who is sort of obligated or obliged to turn it over to the honor council, which is a student-run system, for it to be adjudicated. The professor is not supposed to take the law into his or her own hands, but is supposed to turn the thing over and say, well, this happened. Now, in the real world of professors, I'm sure that many make a judgment call of their own, whether it's egregious enough to do so. If you find a plagiarized sentence where somebody used a quotation that you happen to know and notice, one sentence in a 30-page paper, I imagine some professors would ignore that obligation and call the student in and yell and scream at them, perhaps. But that is the way the system works. Is in theory, the professor is obligated to turn it over and not adjudicate it, like say him or herself. And then it would be looked into. And at Vanderbilt, our honor system does take into account a bunch of factors about how severe it is. And in my division of the university, where I do most of my teaching, I think the minimum penalty is failure in the course if you're found guilty or whatever, if the charge is substantiated. It used to be actually that it was failure on the assignment, and that caused actually an interesting sort of a kerfuffle that led to a harshening the minimum penalty, because some of us on the faculty made the point that if the penalty is only failure of the assignment, that incents you to give it a shot. If you think I'm going to fail this test or this assignment, so I'll cheat, and hopefully I'll get away with it. And if I don't, the worst that'll happen is the thing that was going to happen anyway. And so, failure of the course.
Obviously, the academia world, where you're talking students and grades and degrees, are different than the political world, where you're talking elections and speeches and those kinds of things. But the defense, after it was admitted that there was an error and that this happened, was, now who cares? That's not a defense, because I think people do care where these speeches come from. Maybe not to the degree that it means something for your future down the road as far as getting jobs and stuff, but it says to character, and that to me is part of why you elect people.
Well, and in the case of the Melania Trump situation, I agree with you, it says something about character, but we're not exactly sure whose character, right? I mean, there's so much obfuscation about who actually wrote it, who actually plagiarized. Now, I think the way some commentators are coming down on this, and I think it's a valid point, is putting character aside, it says something about the competence of the campaign organization. And we all know
It should have been caught.
And we all know that campaigns at all levels, but especially at these very high levels, really, your ability to run a campaign says something about your ability to govern. And so when every campaign makes missteps, but when they make a lot of missteps, and they make the kind of missteps that no campaign should make, it does cast a shadow on competence. I'm not sure everybody realizes that. It's going to be very interesting to see if the Hillary Clinton campaign tries to interpret that for the undecided electorate and says, look, you have to look and see. I think one of the problems with the way this all plays out is there's been a lot of sort of hand-wringing or hand-throwing up in the air saying, oh my God, this is plagiarism. Look how bad this is. And I watch this and I wait for somebody to actually interpret it. I'm not sure that a broad swath of the electorate really understands what that really means, and also why it's bad. And some, those interpretations are what really, I think, help turn a scandal of sorts into actually something that moves voters.
I want to jump tracks and talk about academia for a little bit in the political discourse. Roger Ailes is in deep trouble, appears to be on his way out at Fox. One of the cornerstones of his approach to the news was to demonize the lefty academic viewpoint in favor of a more populist kind of common man approach to the world. What role did he play in that, in the demonization of kind of the job that you do? And secondly, when did this all start? When did the Republicans really start taking on academia?
Well, I think the sort of anti-intellectual or anti-academia kind of focus from the right does have a pretty long history, and it certainly predates the existence of Fox News, although Ailes has maybe elevated it in some sense to an art form. I mean, in modern politics, I mean, certainly Pat Buchanan's campaigns of the late 80s, early 90s.
Goldwater go there?
Doing this thing. Well, I mean, if you go back to, work in political science and sociology, of course, going back to the McCarthy era and the paranoid style
Sure.
of American politics. That paranoid style certainly incorporated this kind of anti-intellectualism, attacking intellectuals, and of course back in the Cold War and after the back in the McCarthy period, there was this connection between intellectuals and communism and all this, the sort of red baiting. We don't see that now. Instead of red baiting, it's this sort of social issue baiting. Yeah. So it has a long history. I don't think Ailes was the inventor of it, but he was certainly he's certainly been an accomplished practitioner.
Yeah, and I know that Bob gets this all the time. Bob, you're part of the media. Bruce, you're part of the media. You're a lefty.
Yep.
Bruce, you're an academic, you're a lefty. And I have to say, in media, I would argue a clear majority of those in the media probably do skew left.
Probably.
There's some data on that.
Yeah, there is data. And it's over. So same thing is probably true of academics, right? Or
and there's some data on that, yes.
What's it
certainly.
show?
It shows that a whole lot more university professors in America are liberals than conservatives.
Gotcha.
It doesn't show that they all are, and it shows some interesting differences by disciplines. My main appointment's in a business school, and business school professors nationwide skew, I won't say more conservative, but I will say less liberal. Economics is another field that is more balanced.
But it doesn't really show, is that good or is that bad? Is that biased? Is that not biased? It doesn't show, does that mean then there's no room for tolerance in the discussions, no room for tolerance, no room for both sides of the story? That's the part of the debate that gets left out. They're more liberals, so obviously they're all lefties.
But that debate does actually get, is pitched in academic circles. If you read the higher ed press, people talk about, okay, so if we understood that some
call us out. We know we haven't read
if we understand that some high percentage of professors are more likely to be blue than red, does that mean that when we send our kids to these universities, that they're getting some sort of ideologically skewed education? And by the way, this skew applies just as much, to mathematicians and biologists as it does to people in the fields where ideology is more likely to enter the classroom, political science and sociology and history and such. But the fact of the matter is, there's nothing, in my view, this is my view, there's nothing necessarily wrong with ideological skew as long as it's on the table. When I was in college, I might take a political science course from a professor with an intellectually Marxist bent on European history, and I certainly don't want him to leave that bent out of the classroom.
Right.
That's why he or she's an expert.
Yeah.
And so it's about it being upfront, on the table where appropriate, and not in the classroom where not appropriate. If you're taking calculus and you're getting a lot of anti-Iraq war stuff, the odds are the professor's probably overstepping some bounds.
Discussion. Bruce Berry, Bruce Dobie, that'll do it for another edition of the Bruce and Bob Show. We appreciate very much you coming in and talking to us. We'll have you back again as the discussion goes on as the Democrats get ready for their convention next week.
My great pleasure to have been here.
That'll do it for another edition of the Bruce and Bob Show. We appreciate you watching, appreciate your comments. Coming to you from Jimmy Kelly's Steakhouse, sponsored by Hall Strategies. We appreciate all the input you give us. We'll see you back here next week.